Welcome to the NLP View with your host, Donna Blinston. Each week, Donna will explore how the techniques of NLP can help improve your personal and professional life. And now, here's your host, Donna Blinston.
Hello and welcome to the NLP View. My name is Donna Blinston. Today's guest is Deborah Roffman, author of the best-selling book, Talk to Me First. Everything you need to know to become your kids' go-to person about sex. Sex education can propose difficulties for parents, especially those who feel out of touch with today's world. Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, can provide the parents with the resources they need to be able to step into their child's world and understand the pressures that they're facing. Basically, enable them to be able to relate to their child in a way that will allow the conversation about sex to be free-flowing, easy, comfortable. Deborah Roffman's book tackles everything from developmental stages to strategies for handling embarrassing or difficult conversations, providing the parents with the resources they need to ensure their child wants to come to them first to talk about sex. So I would like to welcome to the show Deborah Roffman. Hello, Deborah.
Hello, and thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for agreeing to be on the show. It's an honour to have you on the show. I have a huge amount of respect for you and for the work that you're doing. It's inspirational. It really is.
Thank you so very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're more than welcome. Firstly, Deborah, could you tell our audience about yourself?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Could you tell our audience about yourself?
About myself? Why, certainly. Yeah. I live in Baltimore. I am married to my high school sweetheart. We have 2 grown children and a year-old granddaughter, which is very, very exciting. And after my family, the love of my life is my profession. I've been a human sexuality educator since 1971, which is a long time. And yes. I've grown not only professionally over the years, of course, but also in terms of the fact that the last 40 years have been extraordinary in terms of cultural change, scientific knowledge, political developments around issues of sexuality, and it's mind-boggling. I'm never off of work because there's always something that I'm reading, I'm seeing on television, I'm seeing online. That's about this subject. And one of the reasons I think that parents are stumped about it is because we tend to think of it in very narrow terms. We think of sexuality education literally as intercourse education, which is a very small box. And because we're uncomfortable with that part of the discussion, we can't see the forest behind the tree to understand that sexuality is a subject that touches just about every facet and aspect of life that you could mention. So it's an extraordinarily rich field to be involved in.
Yes, it's the whole I guess the whole part of nurturing that child to become that independent, secure adults that you want them to be. It's their body image, their attitudes towards sex and attitudes towards relationships, which is often missed because of those awkwardness that's reflected from the parents because of their perceptions of talking about sex and maybe their experiences have had in the past or their own parents, the way that they approached it. It's always been something that's to be kept quiet. And as that's passed down, it manifests itself in other areas.
Well, and look at the contrast between the absence of conversation from the immediate adults in their lives and the fact that this subject is being beamed at them constantly over every form of media that you can identify. So that the mixed message that all these adults that you don't know are wanting to get your attention about this issue, but the real live adults in your life aren't there for you. And that is extremely confusing, especially for young children who, are very sensitive to body language and nonverbal communication, and they get that this isn't a subject that's fraught with anxiety for many of their parents, and yet everybody else seems to be obsessed with it. So it's very, very, very tough for kids to figure this out as they're growing up.
It is, and as I've read your book and really, really enjoyed your book, and through reading it, I've gone and I've looked and researched it more, and I've gone through your website, the articles that you've written, and I wasn't aware of just how much pressure there is out there for children. I was brought up almost wrapped up in cotton wool, and didn't see a lot of the things that the children of today that are seeing, and the stuff around sexting that's out there, where it's a new sexual media from what I'm understanding, of where they're sending sexually explicit messages or photos to each other as text messages.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realise that was going on in primary schools and early secondary schools. I always presumed it would be more your older teenagers, if at all. It never even crossed my mind that it'd be something that would be happening for your 7, 8, 9, 10 and upward-year-old children. So for them to be receiving that, and then mixed with that is the peer pressure and the bullying that can accompany it if you don't understand it or you don't get it. It's a whole realm, and I suppose for the child to be embarrassed because of what's happening from a school perspective, to then be going home and to approach the parents about the bullying side and about the sex as well. There's so many different dynamics that will be going on for that child, which then, as you say, if the parent has got any anxieties, will just exasperate it all.
I think what we do as adults is we hear these things and we are obviously and quite naturally alarmed, but we don't tend to go underneath to see what some of the real issues are. The fact that kids are so-called sexting one another is a problem, but it's primarily a symptom of deeper-rooted problems. And I'll mention 3 of those. And you may recall a story from my book about, 7 or 8 years ago, a third grade or fourth, I think a third grade teacher at my school said, a boy on the playground had taken a picture with a cell phone up a girl's skirt.
Yeah.
And she said, "This is only the beginning. You wait and see." So if this was happening among elementary school children that many years ago, the handwriting was really on the wall if only we'd been able to see it. And the 3 factors that I see are, one, we sort of lost it as adults around technology. Many of us here have heard the public service announcement that comes on at 11 o'clock that asks, it's 11 o'clock p.m., do you know where your children are? And what that originally meant was, are they home? Are they safe and in your home? If you think about it, where could any age child be up in their bedroom with a cell phone with an internet connection in their hand through some technological device? And the answer is they could be anywhere in the world. Yeah. And somehow that escaped us, so that there's a lack of adult thoughtfulness and supervision here and limit setting that has enabled our kids to be in all kinds of situations that they're not developmentally capable of handling with any kind of maturity. The second is the fact that here in the United States, about 10, 12 years ago, marketers did a study of children 8 to 14 and discovered that they had a whole lot of money in their pocket, and decided to blitz this group that they call tweens And unfortunately, people now use that term as if it's a bona fide psychological stage. And their goal was to treat 8 to 14-year-olds as the same developmentally, to tell them that they're really short adults and that they're interested in adult things, and they should be, and they're ready for adult things or soon going to be ready for adult things. And the third, of course, is the fact that really starting in the 1990s, sexuality began to be portrayed in advertising, music, television, movies, et cetera, in ways, not just ways, but also in mass quantities that had not happened before. And I believe at a certain point, our culture became sexualized. And our children born at that time, were going to be raised in a different culture, where almost everything around them was being turned into something that had to do with sex.
It does.
So those are huge cultural changes.
Yeah. And I guess
if you put all that together, it makes sense that kids are involved in the things that they're in.
It does completely. It's almost it's expected, I think, of children nowadays. They've got to keep up with the trend, otherwise they suffer in other ways as well. If they don't keep up with, so it's society. That children aren't allowed to be children the same way they were allowed to be children before. It's interesting.
And that's a tragedy. That's a terrible tragedy. See that? So people look at sexting and they say, "Oh, that's the problem." That's the symptom of the problem.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting when you're talking about the limit setting, which is one thing you discuss in your book. What ponders me is that the setting the limits is, in my respect to the world, is the responsibility of the parents controlling the TV or at least exploring it with them. But because of the lack of knowledge of the parent of the technology, they don't know what to limit. So it's there's a whole knowledge gap that's missing. That even with the parents, the best interest of setting the limits for them, if they're not aware of what's going on and what is out there, they don't know to control it.
Yeah, and then there are parents who think they have absolute control, and they're the ones whose heads are really in the sand, because they're not looking at the world through their children's eyes.
No.
I often say to parents, we have to raise our children in the environment in which they are living, not the environment in which we would like them to be living. And so put that together with the fact that parents tend to be anxious about this subject to begin with, which causes them to put off these kinds of conversations. And we're back to the title of my book, which is Talk to Me First. And what has impressed me over the last 30-plus years has been the stream of research that has come out, and this is very good news and really should motivate us, that children who grow up in families where sexuality is openly discussed grow up healthier in any number of ways, and one of the most important ways is that they postpone involvement in behaviors that carry significant risk.
Do you think
that's I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say, do you think that the relationship between the parents with each other, do you think that if they're showing their romantic sides with each other within the home environment in front of the children, do you think that that is appropriate for the child? Do you think that helps them to feel at ease with it?
I think that what parents are able to model for their children is the concept of intimacy. And that's the conversation we really need to be having with kids, starting at a very early age, is the importance of closeness in our lives, physical, social, emotional, spiritual, and ultimately sexual closeness with another person. And that's a deep-rooted part of our humanity. And if parents can model that and talk about that with their children early in life, I think that that's one of the best buffers they can give their children against what they see constantly around them, which are dehumanized and objectified expressions of sexuality and sexual behavior. We're divorced from affection, relationships, empathy, caring. Really, and that's our humanity right there. So that kids are very much getting the idea that sex is just something that bodies do, and that you can take your body someplace and leave the rest of you someplace else. And it's up to us as parents and other adults to help give kids those truths about life, and to say to them, I want sex to be a part of your life. This is for all kinds of reasons. And what I want you to know about sex is that it's not bad, but it's very powerful. Yes, and because it's so powerful, you need to learn how to deal with it in the right ways. And I'm the one who's going to help you understand that anything and everything you see in media is not going to help you understand that. No.
That's the one thing that I've come across with with my clients from my NLP work is how it's often that the parents' own limiting beliefs that they have around sex and their own personal relationships, if they've had previous bad experiences or their own parents were split up young, or it was a violent relationship, or there was other intimacy problems or changes in the dynamics. It's almost a belief system that's been imprinted on them, which they then go and pass on and re-imprint. And a lot of the work that I do is to look at those belief structures and where they've come from, what the foundations were, and why that belief was formed, and what decisions had they made around that belief that was formed. And in doing that, we can start unpacking how they interact with their own children, and they then start to realise that they're almost pre-modelling the same life for their child. And when my point for it, coming off that is how, thank you. my point is that often, because of their their beliefs that they hold themselves around it, they avoid the subjects, like the subject of contraception, for example, because it's almost, if they talk about contraception, they feel that they're saying to their child, go on contraception, and you can then have as much sex as you want, or it's almost like they're giving them permission. So they avoid that, and they avoid the reasons why you need contraception, so that they don't have to go down that avenue at all.
And that's a good example of how we don't think in particularly sophisticated ways about this subject. So in all of my writing, I talk about the fact that children have 5 needs. They're nurturing needs, and they come into the world with these needs, and they need adults to meet those needs for as long as necessary and in the process, they teach children how to meet those needs on their own. And at that point, they don't need nurturers anymore. They can be self-sufficient adults. So I'll just mention 3 of those needs, because I think in the scenario that you've just described, 3 of those needs are being conflated and seen as one. So one of the needs is for information. And as parents and adults, we see that as one of our primary roles, to pass on the wisdom of the ages to our children. Yet when it comes to sexual knowledge, we are inappropriately frightened. We think that this kind of knowledge has an inherent power that could possibly be dangerous for our children, and we hesitate to give it. And really, that is all the documentation is the opposite of that. That children who are well educated, and doesn't this make sense, make more careful and thoughtful decisions, because when you're well educated, you're being trained how to think about something. And people who think critically make more cautious and deliberate decisions. So we have this double standard around sexual knowledge that causes us to be afraid of the wrong things. And I'm constantly hearing this spoken by parents who are worried about too much too soon, who are worried about are they old enough, are they ready, even when children are asking and asking over and over again for information. So that if I could get parents to give up one thing, that would be it. Yeah. The last thing in the world to be afraid of is knowledge given by a thoughtful adult, a caring adult, in a careful way. Then there's the whole issue of values, which is another of their basic needs. They need to know. They need clear statements about values from adults, and they need adults to name the values that they want their children to value. Yep. And if postponement is a value, then we talk about that, right? Yeah, I'm giving you some information about contraception because, wow, I mean, that's just interesting information. And I've had 4th and 5th graders ask me because they're curious, because they hear reference to it here and there, and they just want their curiosity satisfied. But in addition, we need to say to them, and by the way, it's very important to understand that sexual intercourse is very powerful, and this is one important way, and this is why it's very, very important for you to understand that this is not something that's for kids. This is something for adults. And the third value is limit setting. Therefore, we're going to make sure our kids are not in situations where they're going to engage in behaviors that are beyond their developmental capacity. So see how we conflate all those three things and convince ourselves that we're helping our children by not giving them information.
Do you find that some of the reasons that parents struggle to avoid talking to their children about sex is because they don't want their children to grow up? They're wanting to keep them as children? Yeah,
I think that's always the case. And that's why we have to keep focused on their needs, right?
Yeah,
and our role in relation to their needs, right? But we tend to misread what they're asking for from us, so that when a child, let's say 4 or 5 years old, asks, where did I come from, for all kinds of developmentally based reasons, parents often say, oh, they want to know about sex. No, they don't. They have no interest in sex.
No.
It's not a question about that. They're asking about in more than one way. What they're really asking about is their place in the world. And even the answer for them isn't about sex. It's about the mechanics of how they came into being. And often adults misinterpret that. And they also think that once they've explained this is how the sperm gets to the egg, that they've told their children what sex is, and they haven't taught their children anything about sex.
No.
And then they also say, well, I'm afraid to have that conversation because I don't want to take away their innocence. Well, what does that mean? So we have to take a look at what does that mean, that knowing their origins takes away their innocence. So there's a lot of work that we have to do on ourselves. And as you have so beautifully said, what we bring to the table because of our own experiences in life.
It is. There is so much work to do, and the work that you're doing is such a credit. For me, I want to encourage anybody who's in those situations, or have got children that are approaching that age, and you want to be able to be there. Because one thing I gained from your book, that it's very much starting from the beginning and almost like building on the conversations, so that you're in a way drip feeding bits of information as appropriate, and then tying it into examples as they're growing up older, so that it's almost like a learning journey that you share with them. And I think
that's how we teach them everything else, isn't it?
Of course.
And with this subject, we act as if there's a set amount of knowledge that we hold very tight close to the chest, and then one day, for whatever reason, we decide to open the box and flip over the information. Totally out of context. We're back to that double standard again.
Yeah.
That's why I say that's the most important thing to give up. And we cheat ourselves, actually, of the richness of having ongoing background conversations with our kids, so that as they get older, these conversations are natural. They're just part of family life as we start to teach them more and more sophisticated concepts.
Would you be able to give our audience some advice on how they can handle if the situation presents and they're not prepared for it, how they can handle it, that if they're feeling embarrassed at that moment?
For many years, adults have sort of let themselves off the hook by saying, "Oh, I'm just so embarrassed, I can't have that conversation." And we can't afford that luxury anymore, because look at the default option. Look at what's out there for our kids if we're not there first. So that it's really, if you want the truth, to put it pretty bluntly, it's time for us to grow up as individuals and as a culture. And to get that, for example, if people were embarrassed to say the word polio for some reason in the 1950s, they would have gotten over it, because their children's health and well-being was at stake. So that the sort of rationalizations we give ourselves that cause us to put off these conversations guarantee that somebody else is going to get there first with a spin that we're not going to be happy with.
No, and that's out of our control.
What I'm always sort of joking with parents about is that, you can talk about sex and be embarrassed at the same time and probably even chew gum, right? It's humanly possible. Your vocal cords do work when your face is red. And one of the best things you can say to your kids is, "Boy, this is hard, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, even though I'm embarrassed, because it's so important." That's terrific modeling for kids.
Yes, it's perfect. It is. Well, Deborah, I can't believe how fast this half an hour is going. Just to make sure that everybody who's listening can know where to get your book from, could you tell us how they can contact you, your website, where they'll be able to buy the book, and anything else that you're going to do next?
Well, the website is the best place to get information about me, about the books that I've written. There are also lots and lots of other articles that I've written at the website, and there's direct links to Amazon and other booksellers. And the website address is Talk to Me First, but it's a little bit complicated. It's talk number 2 rather than the word 2, me first. So it's talk number 2, mefirst.com. And I think what I want to leave your listeners with most of all is this. Everybody wants to know, what's the secret? How do we do this? And the big secret is there's no secret. That's the big secret. What we need to do is simply treat this subject in our children's lives in exactly the same ways as we treat all other subjects. And we've got plenty of practice in doing that. Whatever good parenting skills we have, good parenting is good parenting is good parenting. And we simply need to be applying the same principles to this conversation and these conversations as we do to everything else. And my hope is that that's what Talk to Me First helps parents to know how to do.
It definitely does. And Deborah, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. The work that you're doing, the book that you've written, and everything else that you're about. It's been an honour having you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. It truly is my honour. And I wish you best of luck, and I wish your listeners all the best.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you would like to learn more about NLP, please tune in each week and also visit my website, www.donnablunston.com, where you can pick up a copy of my best-selling book, Psychobabble, a straightforward, plain English guide to the benefits of NLP. Thank you.